This tutorial is about connecting your mobile application to web APIs. It's very common nowadays to consume APIs. Actually, most of the value of your mobile application is going to come from its backend, either because you collect data that you push to the backend, or you display data that has value to the end users. So connecting your application to a backend is really easy with mdsl and Canappi. The core concept is about creating a connection. So we have three types of connection. We have the one we've seen in the kitchen sink tutorial. This is an onboard data source. It's not very interesting, but it can be very useful for building a prototype without having to connect it to anything. The other type of connections is a connection to your own services and APIs. So here I made available a couple of files. They're simply files. They're not even web services talking to a database, for instance. And you have control of the structure, and you pretty much define whatever you want. And then there's a third type, which is whatever exists out there. For instance, a connection to a Facebook status feed, or a YouTube channel, or all the tweets, or your tweets, or someone else's tweet that you want to keep track of. So all those connections, as you can see, are defined right there. There is hardly anything to define. You may want to specify the protocol, the data format, of course the URL, the verb, the HTTP verb that is used to connect. We support all kinds of protocols from HTTP, SOAP, Atom, RSS. All those things can be used right away out of the box. So before we continue, I want to show you the data format. What Canappi is expecting is data structured like what you see here. We have a list of contacts, so there is a root element called contacts, and then we have the rows, and then each row contains a series of key value pair. This pattern is actually very, very common in representing data in web APIs. We've been able to connect to pretty much everything using this particular pattern. Now, there's some variations that we support as well. In other words, the root element of the rows doesn't have to be the root element of the document. It can be embedded somewhere in a broader document, and you would be able to pinpoint that particular root element. The other thing is, often the rows are a mixture of things, and we'll see that with one of the feed that we have. The Twitter feed, it's an RSS feed, and basically there's all kinds of elements, including all the entries that you're interested in. And also there might be sometimes some complex values. So you would have, for instance, a name which would have itself two key value pairs, one for the first name and one for the last name. So we support all those variants from the core model that you see here. So let's go back here, now that you're familiar with building a connection. As I mentioned, if you look at the YouTube feed, the YouTube channel, it is an Atom feed, and basically, if we take a look at it, as you can see, all the elements that of interest are, below a root element, which is a feed. However, there is a number of other elements which are not related to entry. In order to filter them out, we basically specify that the result set that we're interested in is the feed, and then the elements that represent the row are the entries, and from there we can just bind everything else. So how do you bind data to the UI? That's very, very simple. You start at the view level, you define a view, you define a layout as we've seen in previous tutorial, and then you bind this layout to a particular connection. And if there is an init keyword at the operation level, it means that this operation will be invoked automatically as the view gets displayed, and the data will populate the controls of the view. Otherwise, you can also define regular operations and invoke them through, pushing buttons or running queries and other kind of searches. So that's very easy. How do you bind now this particular connection to the layout, the controls of the layout? That's itself very easy too. So here's the layout where our contacts are going to be bound to. And as you can see, the name of the controls, first name and email, actually match the tags, whether they're XML or JSON, doesn't matter, of the data source. So that's how the binding happens. Of course, it doesn't always work that way. You sometimes want to name your controls in a different way. So we have the notion of the mapping element. So we can provide a mapping. And basically, if we rename this control, which is now no longer first name, the generated code will actually perform this mapping automatically, provided that we actually mention the name of the mapping. And that's it. So for this demo, we'll just keep it simple. We can take out the mapping element, and we're going to rename the row to first name. And we're basically ready to go. So I'm going to log in, and I will upload the file that we have. Here we go. It's going to our CloudGen server, and the files are now available. So we open a connection sample. And as you can see, Canappi generated all the files. So now we're going to create a new Xcode project. I want to make sure that I'm going to use the right name, so I come back to this file and I copy the application name in the main element. And I create a new view-based application, always the same type. We don't support any other type because everything else is built from there at that level. I'm going to paste the name, and I'm going to put it in our 1.0 release directory. Okay, so now I will copy the files that were generated. This is a little bit tedious, but as I mentioned before, we don't have really an option. Please replace all the files. They've been generated to do so. And now I'm going to take the English.lproj project and similarly copy it there. Again, replace everything. And now all you do is you add a connection. You add your files to the data connection project. So they are in the correct directory. They're all in black. I like to check this flag even though it's not necessary here. And I'm going to do the same here. Okay, so if I compile now, we're not done. If I compile, I'm going to get a series of errors. And the reason is because it needs a number of libraries. So the first libraries is actually open source libraries. They are, as you can see, JSON and this ASI framework, which is a framework that sits on top of the CF network library, and provides an object-oriented view of, HTTP connections. So what I need to do is basically add these files. You would probably want to create a group in which you add all these files, and there will be linked on the websites where to download those libraries. So you probably want to create separate groups for JSON, ASI framework, reachability. Just for the sake of simplicity, I'm going to add them directly in the project directory. Okay. So I'm going to, try to compile again, and it will still not work. There's a number of SDK libraries that now needs to be included in project to support those libraries properly. So it's very easy. You click on the project explorer. You click on the project inspector, and you go to build phases. And here you just add a number of libraries. The first one is CF network, of course. The second one is core data framework. Then we have core mobile core services. Then we have system configuration. And the last one is the libc 123.dylib. Now it should compile. So this is the XML version. As you can see in the console, there's a trace. This is where the file came back. We'll now go to the JSON tab. We get the same result because the data is the same, and this is what we have here. And then we will go to the contact details, and as you can see, we have the the data that's now bound to our view. And that's it.